great to see you here. We have discussed at this summit where AI is going, where financial firms and central banks are planning to hope to do with AI, but also how they're planning to manage risks that they can see stemming from AI. And I hope we can have a discussion around sort of zooming out from the world of AI and the financial world and think about more opportunities and threats for our broader society. But if I may, I've heard you say that you don't see any serious attempts to regulate the financial system as we see it in the world to actually be at a level where humans can understand it. And given that starting point, and given the issues around AI, it's not looking like the financial system is going to get any easier to understand. If you think that this is going to play out, how would you think that regulators and supervisors should think about AI in the context of the already complicated financial industry we're operating in?
Well, that's a very important question. And I think what we should understand is that people need to understand finance. At the present moment, I think that maybe 1% of the population really understands how the financial system works. What happens if this number goes down to 0? No human being, no president, no prime minister, nobody in the central bank understands finance anymore, because AI has made it too complicated. This could lead to a political and social crisis of a kind we've never encountered before. It could lead to power shifting from humans to algorithms, to alien forms of intelligence. And maybe I'll start by saying what finance is. What does the financial sector do? You know, farmers grow food that we eat. Workers produce the textiles that we wear. What does the financial system do? It creates trust. This is the product, ultimately. The product of the financial system is trust. Money, for instance, is a mechanism to create instant trust between millions of strangers. I go into a shop, I meet a stranger that I never met in my life, I give them this piece of paper, and they give me food in exchange. And bonds and shares and so forth. People have invented so many different financial devices over history, but what they really do is create trust between millions of people so they can share their resources, their knowledge, and work together towards common goals. Now, until today, the only entities that could understand financial devices like money or bonds or shares and could invent new financial devices were human beings. Horses did not understand money. We bought and sold horses for money, but the horses didn't understand money, which is why they couldn't, for instance, unite 1 million horses together. Now, AI is the first tool that we created that can actually understand finance better than us. Because, you know, finance in the end, it's the easiest thing for an AI to really understand. It's only data, it's only information. To wash dishes, AI needs to do something in the real world, in the physical world. That's difficult. But to understand finance, it's only information in, information out. Now, the danger is that AI would be able, on the one hand, in the hands of bad actors, AI could destroy trust between people. And on the other hand, the main trust will be between different AI systems. So just imagine a scenario when most of the financial activity in the world is being done by AI. Humans have lost the ability to understand most of the financial system. It's too complicated for our brains. And there is a financial crisis, and no human politician is able to understand what is happening. We have to rely on the AI to tell us what is the crisis, and what are the potential solutions. The political implications are dangerous on different levels, but most clearly, it's really giving control of a very important part of the world and a very important part of politics to a non-human intelligence that we cannot regulate and supervise.
So I take from this that this is a very sobering message. So let's unpack that a bit further. You can say that, okay, well, only 1% perhaps understand the financial system. I would claim that most of us happily step into an aeroplane having very vague understanding of how that works, but we trust that people who don't even know each other, we certainly don't know them, take us from A to B without the plane crashing. But it sounds from what I hear you saying that this last percent, if that goes down to zero, then we are all in deep trouble. And one way to create a catchphrase from what you're saying is, no further AI without further trust. And I would say that we might be in a lucky situation that we are at the early phases of exploring AI, or at least for the moment assume that. You have warned that if we're not careful, decision makers in the future might sort of be reduced to puppets and the real decision makers are just algorithms. But if we don't want to get on that path, or history is not sort of, or if the future is not sort of predetermined, we can actually decide where we want to go. What do you think we need to do now with the tools we have at hand to make sure that we don't end up in that situation, neither in the financial system and certainly not when it comes to decision making as a whole in our countries?
We need to prevent AI from becoming completely unfathomable. That if we give it a lot of power to make decisions about human beings, about human society, we need the ability to understand it and to regulate it. This is the crucial condition, and there is a very big difference between a situation when 1% of humanity understands something and 0%. That's a very big difference, and your example with the airplane is perfect. I mean, yes, this is why we have experts. We trust experts in many different fields, with airplanes, with medicine. It's the same with finance. We don't need everybody to understand everything. This is really impossible. But if you think about, for instance, the one of the last big financial crises, the one of 2007, 2008, it started with a failure of regulation over new financial tools, new financial devices, the CDOs, that some very, very bright people invented, but almost nobody understood, and therefore there was an oversight of regulation. Now imagine a situation maybe in 10 years when AIs create a new financial device which is orders of magnitude more complicated than CDOs. You need to go over trillions of data points to understand this financial device. We can't do that, but the AIs can. For a couple of years, it works perfectly well. It generates a lot of trust. It generates economic growth, profits, and then something goes wrong. And nobody knows why. And again, we can ask the AI to tell us what has happened and what to do about it. But this is a very dangerous situation. And also, even if it gives us good advice, it raises a question about whether the public will continue to trust the political system. Like, you vote for politicians who are supposed to make these decisions, but they are no longer able to understand what is happening. We already are in a situation when the public is losing trust in experts, in politicians, in democratic institutions. This could really exacerbate this crisis of trust between the general public and the supposed experts and politicians that hopefully understand what is happening and regulate it.
So going to your role, your day job as a distinguished historian, I mean, I get that there's risks around artificial intelligence. We could possibly be the greatest transition that the world has faced. But as an historian, you know, this is not the first big transition we have seen in the world. Perhaps the biggest, but certainly industrial revolution, general purpose technologies, the advent of modern democracies were pretty groundbreaking shakeups. A couple of revolutions thrown in and wars, pretty serious shakeups. So I guess my question to you is that what can we learn from the past here to try to avoid having to land in that sort of situation that you're warning from? As an historian, are there good examples from history where people actually manage to avoid getting things too wrong and that we can take inspiration from?
Yeah, I think humans are extremely adaptable. And, you know, everything we invent has both negative and positive potential. You invent a knife, you can use it to murder somebody, or to save their life in surgery, or to cut salad. So there is always both of these potentials. And over time, humans learn the dangers and they understand how to employ the technology or the new structure in the best way. The problem is the transition period. The problem is the path. Even if in the end we get it right, on the way there, we often have to go through dangerous and failed experiments. So let's take the Industrial Revolution as an example. That when machines started to transform the economy and society in the 18th century, the 19th century, there are a lot of doomsday prophecies about what the machines will do. And looking back from 2024, we can say that in the end, we got it more or less right. We learned how to use steam engines and electricity and trains in order to build more prosperous and even more peaceful societies than in the 18th century. But the big problem was the failed experiments on the way. Modern imperialism, for instance, was a very big failed experiment in how to build industrial societies. There were a lot of people in the 19th century that argued that the only way to build an effective industrial society was to build an empire. Because unlike previous agricultural societies, which were more or less self-sustaining, an industrial society needed a lot of raw materials and global markets, and the only way to do that was to build an empire. So imperialism, with the millions of victims and the terrible things it did, was really a failed experiment in how to build an industrial society. Communism was another failed experiment in how to build an industrial society. And that a lot of people in the 1920s, 1930s, even later, thought that the best way to build an industrial society was what the Soviets were doing. And it took decades and tens of millions of victims to realize that no, this is not the best way to use electricity and steam engines and trains. Nazism was another failed experiment in building an industrial society. Now, if we had to go through these kinds of failed experiments with imperialism and totalitarianism and world wars in order to learn how to make the best use of electricity and the internal combustion engine and trains and things like that, what will happen in the 21st century when we have to learn how to use far more powerful technology? Now, AI is, again, potentially orders of magnitude more powerful than anything we saw in the Industrial Revolution, because AI is the first tool in history that can make decisions by itself and can create new ideas by itself. Steam engines could not decide how to use themselves. We decided what to do with them. Even atom bombs could not create new ideas. But AI can make decisions by itself. This is the very definition of an AI. It's a machine that can learn things we don't know and can make decisions independently and can create completely new ideas that no human being ever thought about. Learning how to use these tools in a good way is likely to be more complicated than learning how to use steam engines. Now, we can say that in the end, it will be okay. We'll get it right. As a historian, I'm concerned about the way, not about the end result. If we have to go through another cycle of empires and totalitarian regimes and world wars based on AI, this is very, very bad news. So,
well, it sounds like to see a silver lining in this. We will get it right after we've tried everything else, imperialism, communism, Nazism, and maybe to give a further positive spin is that we and our children, grandchildren, etc., will have knowledge that they didn't have back then.
yeah.
So let's hope that we could sort of fast forward through that period or avoid it altogether. And I think one of the ways to do that is to be mindful of the risks. Technology is fantastic, but used in the wrong way, it can be very dangerous. I think I have some people in the audience who might disagree that it's inevitable that AI will take over decision making, but it will certainly influence decision making. We have discussed whether monetary policy decisions is possible to automate. The answer is yes, but as human beings, we always want to have someone accountable or someone to blame. And that's a deep human feature in us, that we ultimately we want to interact with one another rather than a machine. Machine is helpful, but we are still human enough to want to interact with one another at the end of the day. I think I know the answer to your question now, given that your view about what the financial crisis, the upbringing of the financial crisis some 15 years ago, but still, I'll have a shot at this. So the mission of the Bank for International Settlements is to support central banks through international cooperation to pursue monetary and financial stability. I think personally the beauty of central banks is that they are not as dependent on short-term political decision-making as many other parts of the public sector. So central banks, if they operate well and has a well-working mandate, they can actually take the longer perspective. Do you think that there could be a role for central banks in sort of drive international cooperation where AI is used with care, that the central banking community can sort of show good practice, if you will? And sure, there will be others who has another different agenda, but that is something that, well, we will have to leave to the law enforcement agencies and ultimately military defense. But do you think there is some sort of way out of your rather dire forecasts?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if it was doomed, there was no point having this conversation.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
History is never deterministic.
No.
We always have options. The same technology can always be used in different ways. Again, looking back to the 20th century, you look at industrial technology. It was used to create totalitarian regimes, but also liberal democracies. You look at North Korea and South Korea today, they have access to exactly the same technology, using it in a very different way. Now, how to make sure that we are using technology wisely, I wouldn't trust some technological gadget to do it for us. We need to have humans in the loop. but I wouldn't trust any individual geniuses or charismatic leaders either. The solutions that we again and again see in history is institutions. I know that people often find institutions again, complicated and bureaucratic, but this is the best thing that humans have managed to come up with. And we need to build good institutions. This is the only thing that can really protect us from the most dangerous potential of AI and also other technologies. I would say that two things that are very important for a bank when coming to think about the regulation of AI is, first of all, to make sure that the AI remains accountable and understandable. If we reach a point when we can no longer understand it, then at least in democratic societies, this is really the end of democracy. If a democratic public can no longer understand and hold someone accountable for financial decisions, this is a very large part of what politics is about. It is about finance, it's about the economy. And we, of course, will need to rely also on technology to help us understand AI, but we'll need to keep humans in the loop. And for this, we need to build good human institutions. The other point is to keep the focus on the issue of trust. And going back to what we spoke in the beginning, money is really trust. Money is not made of gold or silver or paper or anything. Money is trust between people. This is the goal of the financial system. So when you come to regulate the financial system, the key question is, how do we make it easier to create more trust between more people? If we achieve this, then the goal is achieved.
You say we should keep humans in the loop. I think we should be more ambitious than that. And let me, before I open the floor for questions from the audience, just point out one thing that is, I think, strong characteristics humankind, which is that we have dreams, and some things that we do are not entirely rational, and some things can be outright a bit crazy or be revealed as a pure accident. Let me take some examples. The idea to put a man on the moon wasn't entirely rational, would probably not have survived today's budget committees, but it worked in the 60s, thank God for that. Accidental discovery was the discovery of penicillin, or Alexander Fleming was a very good marketer, but certainly a very inspiring example. I don't think personally that AI could replicate these sort of events that are not entirely rational or sort of happen by accident. So from where I see it, humans will still play an important role to create these sort of quantum leaps that these two examples give. Or do you think that AI will take over those as well?
I think that a lot of people say that AI will never be creative, but it is already very creative. You look at examples like the game of Go, which was one of the first time that really the world woke up to the age of AI. Go is a board game, a bit like chess, but much, much more complicated. People have been playing Go for 3,000 years in East Asia. It has been considered for thousands of years one of the most important art forms that every cultured person should know. Entire schools of thought about how to play Go and different strategies. Then AlphaGo came along, and within a few weeks or months, revolutionized the game. It started playing Go in a way that no humans ever thought of playing for 3,000 years. What became clear is because we are organic beings that evolved by evolution, our imagination and the way we think is limited to, let's say, a certain area within the landscape of playing Go. And for 3,000 years, we only explored this limited landscape, this limited area. AI is not organic. It doesn't think like a human or a chimpanzee or a dog. It makes decisions in a completely different way. And within a very short time, it started exploring completely new or alien areas within this landscape of Go. What's true of Go is true of more and more areas in science, in art. You know, AI is now composing music. So people say yes, but it only learns from previous human symphonies and poems and songs. That's true for now, but this is true of us as well. A human composer also relies on previous experience or previous exemplars. But already now, AI is beginning to explore new areas in the landscape of music. And maybe most important to understand is that AI is just a tiny baby. The AI of today is just if you think again in evolutionary terms, it's like we are 10 years from the beginning of organic evolution on Earth. If you go back 4 billion years ago to the beginning of organic life, so think that you are 10 years from the emergence of the first life forms. And can you even envision dinosaurs or human beings? Now, AI is just beginning, but its evolution is much, much faster than organic evolution. It is millions of times faster. So if the AIs of today are like amoebas, we might encounter the AI Tyrannosaurus Rex within a decade or two. And we have no idea what it will be capable of doing. Again, all these discussions of AI, 10 years ago, nobody except a very small community of experts was talking about AI. So think about the previous 10 years and try to imagine where we will be in 10 or 20 years. And in terms of creativity, I have no doubt, given what we already know, that AI is capable of maybe a different kind of creativity, but precisely because of that, it's really going to be a game changer in so many fields, because the initials AI, people think it stands for artificial intelligence. But there is nothing artificial about the new forms of AI. They are developing on their own. It's better to think about AI as standing for alien intelligence, because it really thinks and creates in an alien way, a different way from us. And this is even true of finance. Again, I think about financial devices as a kind of art form. The first person who came up with the idea of a bond or of a currency or of Bitcoin, this is a sort of art. It's very creative, very imaginative. So I think we'll see AI creativity also in this field coming up with new types of financial devices that no human being would ever imagine creating.
I would say that those financial products that you pointed out to, they came up because they satisfied someone's need. And I think that is something that is hugely important among human beings, that we are very good at figuring out, A, what needs do we have, do we want to satisfy? And sometimes we don't know that we had needs that we wanted to satisfy, with Steve Jobs with his iPhone, the Explorer. But I'm more optimistic than you, and I'm going to stick to those institutions, actually, because I think I agree that those are our best way to organize and coordinate sort of AI development in a responsible way. Not everybody will join that journey, but if enough people do it, enough institutions are on that journey, I still think we have a good shot. I certainly like being an optimist more than anything else. But let's open up the floor for questions from the audience. And please state your name. And I think we have a new record in the number of... So let's start with the gentleman up to the left side. And please state your name first and then your question to Professor Harari.
Thank you, Cecilia. My name is Hiren. Thank you very much to Professor Harari as well. It's been really privileged listening to you. So my question really goes in the same vein of our recent discussion is about human versus AI. The human is more intelligent, ingenious form, right? I mean, it's organic form. We know how to sustain, and we sustain over last years, the climate crisis, so where we are today, and if you look at the future, we cannot look at the AI in isolation, right? There are other external factors to play, and in particular, the climate, right? The sustainability aspect. AI is feed on electricity. Electricity then feed on these sort of natural resources which are depleting and these kind of things. So how do you sort of see that, AI is sort of surviving, or AI is sort of overcoming those challenges which humans have, and humans still have the ability in sort of to go through those kind of another round of challenges, So just wanted to get your perspective on this.
That energy consumption is going to hold back on the AI development?
Well, energy consumption, as we move slow, right? As we actually increase more capacities, there will be more consumption, right? And if we actually start feeding more energies and electricity, I think it's going to have the sort of downside effect on the environment and the natural resources and all of these things.
I see.
So somewhere actually it's going to come to the halt, right? Now, human can survive without electricity, but AI would not, right? I mean, that's a crude example.
And
probably.
Your
I would
question
just
again is.
Well, I think I understood
Okay.
the question.
Okay, good.
And on this, I maybe have something more positive to say. And I'm not against AI. I don't think we can just stop developing it. And I think it has a lot of positive potential. One of the positive potentials is to help us deal with the climate crisis and with the energy crisis. I don't think that it's, given the current political and economic situation around the world, solving the climate crisis by stopping all economic growth is impossible and unwanted, because there are billions of people around the world whose living conditions need a significant improvement. And if every person in India, in Africa, in South America enjoys the same living conditions as the average person in Europe or the United States, with current technology, the ecology will collapse. But on the other hand, we can't say to people in India or in Africa, no, you cannot enjoy what the Europeans have. So we need to develop better technology, more eco-friendly technology, and we need to do it fast. And this is something that AI, when it's used correctly, can certainly help us with. The basic understanding is that there is no shortage of energy in the universe. We just don't know how to tap it and how to use it in the best way, in the most eco-friendly way. And I think this is one field where AI can be extremely helpful.
Thank you. Let's take a question on this side. So why don't we take one over there? Yeah, you get to choose. If you need to hold your hands up, otherwise you will lose the chance. That's nice.
So thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be talking to you. Your books are fantastic. So Gemini happened. Google's Gemini. This was a couple of months ago. Many would argue that there was a decision to put the finger on the scale so that the outcomes that individuals would see when they were using Gemini were much more PC. I don't know if everybody in the room is familiar with this, but you would put in, show me pictures of the founders of the United States, and you would see an African-American woman. I was in Silicon Valley when this just happened, and I was talking to different people out there, like, where does this go? Because in the end, these are individuals that are prompting, seeking information, and getting feedback from algorithms. And some of the libertarian points of views that were shared with me are, in the end, individuals are going to see what basically the AI has been trained that they want to see. It's the human bias, that this is going to be almost like a reinforcement loop. And I'm trying to, and so then the next question is, so, okay, in the United States, we have the Southeast, where we see lots of people of a certain race, and other places, right? Like, where does this go? And so I continue to poke at this question, and I'm trying to reconcile it with what you're saying about its trusted institutions, because I'm having a hard time seeing how this sort of plays out in a way that isn't what we're all afraid of, humans attacking each other.
Yeah, I mean, we had these kinds of debates and problems throughout history. Every time a new information technology comes along, there is a big discussion about censorship. And, when the printing press was invented, the big bestsellers of early modern Europe, they were not scientific books. Hardly anybody read Galileo or Copernicus. The big bestsellers were witch hunting manuals, how to identify and kill witches, very popular. Also popular were these extremist religious literature. The printing press was to some extent responsible for the scientific revolution, but also for the European witch hunt craze, which was a modern, not a medieval phenomenon, and also for the wars of religion. So they had a big issue with what kind of things you are allowed to print, and we have a big issue with what kind of things AI is allowed to say. The difference is that AI has agency, unlike printing presses. The printing press printed whatever you told it to print. AI is learning by itself. Any attempt to try and kind of in advance determine what these AIs will say down the road is ultimately doomed to failure because they are learning and developing. This is a huge issue for democracies. It's even a bigger issue for dictatorships. One thing that people often miss is that dictators are terrified of these AIs even more than democratic governments. Because think about it. What is the most dangerous thing for a dictator? The most dangerous thing for a dictator is a subordinate more powerful than the dictator that the dictator does not know how to control. Dictators usually control their subordinates, their agents, by terrifying them. But you cannot terrorize an AI. Think about a chatbot, let's say in Russia. Now, a human is afraid to say certain things in Russia because he or she could be punished. But you cannot send a chatbot to the gulag. So how do you make sure that the chatbot doesn't start to say all kinds of things that it is not supposed to say? And there is, in essence, it's a new challenge for all kinds of human regimes because it's the first time in history that regimes, either democratic or dictatorial, need to figure out how to control agents, entities with agency, which have no emotions, which cannot be terrorized or punished or whatever. So it's going to be a very interesting ride for all governments around the world, how to deal with this issue.
No doubt. Let's have one last question on this side. Vincent, you get to choose again. Or if you can combine your questions, maybe you can coordinate there. Yeah, we'll see. But these two are your last chance.
My name is Fabio, and I make it very short. I liked what you mentioned. Money is trust among people. And the goal is to have more trust with more people. Could you elaborate a bit? What would be the best next action to reach that goal? And maybe as a side remark, is this maybe the chance to overcome the concept of nations?
I don't think we need at this stage to overcome the concept of nations.
Gentlemen at the front, do you have a related question or something completely different?
I do. Actually.
Yeah, all right, fire away.
Because nations, I think, in your terminology and your thought would be fictions. So on a related note, the space that the human Go player can operate in is limited by its evolutionary biology and so on, right? Whereas an AI is not. The fictional constructs that we can come up with as human beings are limited by our evolutionary biology as well. But an AI is not. Could there be fictions that could result in human flourishing, which far exceeds that which we could come up with on our own? And are we morally obliged, therefore, to give up to our robot overlords and allow them to determine what the fictions should be that we are then pursuing to maximize human flourishing?
All right. The end of nations and, well, sort of the end of humans. Yuval, have a shot at this, please.
The short answer is no. Very dangerous to just trust the AIs. Yes, they can create completely new kinds of fictions, but fiction, again, it can be helpful, it can be very dangerous. Nations are a good example. Yes, nations is something that we created in our imagination. They exist only in our collective imagination. They can be very dangerous if we don't know how to use them, leading to wars and conflicts and so forth. But they are also, so far, one of the best inventions, one of the best creations of humanity, because nations enable us to go beyond the immediate circle of friends and family that we know personally and care about millions of strangers that we never met. You know, patriotism, in its best form, what patriotism means is that I'm paying taxes so that strangers on the other side of the country will get good health care. This is patriotism. And people who imagine that without nations, we would be living in some kind of utopia, no. At present, we would just disintegrate into tribal chaos, with people caring only about their immediate friends and family. Yes, we need to find ways for nations too to cooperate between them, but this is the key, not to abolish nations. We are not there yet in terms of what we are capable of historically. The question is, how do we make them cooperate instead of fighting each other? And here, yes, we need new imaginative creations, also in the field of finance, which, again, should focus on building trust. So to take one famous example, when I look at Bitcoin, as a historian, I don't like it, because this is a money built on distrust. The central idea of Bitcoin is basically electronic gold, that we don't trust the banks, the governments, so we don't want to give them the ability to create as much money as they like, so we create this Bitcoin. It's a currency of distrust. I do think that the future belongs to electronic money, but what we've seen over the last centuries is that it's actually a good idea to give banks and governments the ability to create more and more money in order to build more trust within society. So I'm not sure what money would look like in 20 years or 30 years, but I hope it will be a currency of greater trust and not a currency of distrust.
We'll get it done. And it's also reassuring to hear that institutions has a future and countries has a future. That will be happy dreams for me tonight. And we're going to talk to you at some point in the future and hope that we are still here in flesh and bones and not in our algorithmic forms. Thank you very much, Professor Harari. I can say that I have a very happy audience in front of me, and we're giving you a hand from us.